Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're unpacking a topic that literally wraps around our daily lives, from the moment we wake up until we go to sleep, yet we rarely give it a second thought. We are going to explore the rigorous standards behind the physical and chemical safety of the packaging industry. Let's kick things off with a slightly provocative thought. When you pick up a product, how do you actually know the package holding it is physically and chemically safe? Think about your morning coffee cup, the plastic wrap around your fresh produce, or the blister pack holding your medication. We interact with these materials constantly, but what goes into ensuring that the container itself isn't introducing a hazard to the product inside or to you, the consumer? Well, packaging safety is absolutely critical for this industry, precisely because so many of these products are used in consumer-facing applications, especially in food and healthcare. When a company manufactures corrugated cardboard for shipping electronics, safety is important, sure, but when they're producing beverage containers, bottles for household products, or specialized packaging for pharmaceuticals, the stakes are exponentially higher. A failure here isn't just an inconvenience, it's a direct threat to public health. So, how are companies held accountable for these high stakes? We are looking at the SASB standards today, specifically their framework for the containers and packaging industry. These standards provide a set of highly specific, industry-focused metrics. They guide companies on exactly what sustainability-related risks they need to report to investors and the public. Today, we're zeroing in on a very specific piece of this puzzle: consumer trust and safety. Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. First, safety in everyday packaging. Second, the SASB safety metrics. Third, tracking packaging recalls. Fourth, managing chemicals of concern. And fifth, the value of transparency. Let's jump into Section 1, Safety in Everyday Packaging and the High Stakes for Consumers. Why is product safety such a massive priority in this sector? As the standard explicitly points out, ignoring safety isn't just dangerous for consumers, it carries heavy financial and reputational penalties for the manufacturer. I absolutely love this quote from the source material because it perfectly connects the human element to the business element. An unsafe product doesn't just harm a customer, it triggers a total cascade of negative business impacts. Products get pulled, costly redesigns are suddenly required, revenue drops, and honestly, brand value takes a massive hit. Trust is hard to build, and boy, is it incredibly easy to lose. Moving to Section 2, the SASB safety metrics and measuring accountability. So how exactly is this accountability measured under the SASB framework? How do you take something as broad as safety and turn it into hard data? The framework outlines a wide breadth of sustainability topics, but it isolates product safety into two distinct, trackable metrics. First, quantitative data on product recalls. And second, a detailed discussion and analysis of how the company identifies and manages emerging materials and chemicals of concern. Which brings us to Section 3, Tracking Packaging Recalls Focusing on Physical Safety. Let's dig into that first metric, which focuses strictly on tracking physical product recalls. This is where the rubber meets the road when a safety issue has actually hit the market. What's super interesting about this definition of a recall is that it goes way beyond just taking a product off a shelf. SASB defines it to include things like repairs, replacements, refunds, and even notice or warning programs. So if a packaging company realizes a certain child-proof cap they made might fail under certain conditions, and they issue a public warning about it, that counts as a recall. It's comprehensive, ensuring companies really can't hide behind technicalities to avoid reporting a safety failure. Furthermore, the standard requires companies to track both voluntary recalls initiated by the company itself and involuntary recalls demanded by government regulators. This distinction is absolutely crucial for transparency. A voluntary recall shows a company is actively monitoring its own products and taking responsibility when something slips through the cracks. An involuntary recall, on the other hand, means a regulatory authority, like a government health agency, had to step in because a product failed to comply with safety standards or had a glaring defect. SASB requires companies to report the total number of recalls and the total units recalled, separated by voluntary versus involuntary. But it doesn't stop at just the raw numbers. Companies must also provide detailed discussions of what SASB calls notable recalls. If a recall involves serious injuries or fatalities, or if it affects a massive swath of products, the company has some explaining to do. They're expected to detail the description and cause of the issue, the exact cost to remedy it, the corrective actions they're taking to ensure it never happens again, and any other significant outcomes like legal proceedings. It forces a public post-mortem. Let's look at Section 4, Managing Chemicals of Concern and Chemical Safety. Moving past the physical side of recalls, let's dive into the second crucial pillar, managing the chemical safety of packaging materials. This is arguably much more complex because chemical hazards are often totally invisible to the naked eye. SASB requires companies to disclose the exact operational processes they use to assess chemicals for hazards. It's not enough to just say, we test our products. Companies have to explain how they manage materials that might be hazardous at every stage, from the initial formulation and design to the actual procurement of chemicals, right through to product safety testing and labeling. Think about how many times a day you physically touch a plastic container. It's constant, right? Because of that, companies must specifically discuss how they manage known hazards. We're talking about things that often make the headlines: plasticizers like BPA and phthalates, as well as certain phenols and formaldehyde. Plasticizers like BPA are used to make plastics more durable, but they've raised significant health concerns regarding their use in food and beverage containers. By specifically calling out these emerging materials of concern, the framework ensures packaging companies are directly addressing the exact chemicals that consumers and scientists are most worried about. To mitigate these chemical risks, companies have to report on concrete actions. This means utilizing exclusion lists or leveraging screening methods to actually find safer material substitutes. This brilliantly illustrates how the industry is trying to get ahead of the problem. Instead of just reacting to regulations, companies can report on how they are actively substituting bad materials for better ones. The standard mentions specific tools like green screen for safer chemicals, or adhering to ISO standards for minimizing heavy metals like lead and mercury. They aren't just identifying the bad stuff, they are showing their work on how they replace it. Finally, Section 5, the value of transparency, and why all of this matters. Let's bring this all together. Why is this intense level of transparency so incredibly valuable? Ultimately, companies that rigorously follow these SASB metrics to manage physical and chemical risks aren't just protecting us, the consumers, they are safeguarding their own brand value and their bottom line. By tracking every single recall, whether it's a minor warning or a major involuntary pull, and by rigorously screening out chemicals like BPA and phthalates during the design phase, these companies build serious resilience. They avoid catastrophic financial hits, and they earn the trust of the customers who rely on them every single day. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a quick thought to consider the next time you pick up a packaged item at the grocery store or pharmacy. Knowing that these rigorous standards exist for tracking everything from physical defects to microscopic chemical hazards, how does that change the way you view the brands you buy from? Transparency isn't just about corporate reporting. It's about empowering you, the consumer, to know exactly what is wrapping the products you bring into your home. Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive into packaging safety.